If you've watched my tutorial series on how to create Unreal Engine space scenes, then you will love this tutorial, because in this particular one we are going to create planet rings using procedural methods that's going to give you a really nice, good looking, crisp effect. So consider this as the next step in evolving your space creation series that you're making in Unreal Engine. This tutorial will go in much depth on what everything does, why we're doing it, and how we're setting everything up. It's very important that you understand the basic and the advanced concept of creating this material shader that will allow you to have a procedural ring that you can edit at any point. You can have shadows being cast by the planet, and also the ring itself will look very crisp and very detailed. It's very important that you follow along, and this tutorial is meant for beginners and intermediate alike, so don't feel alienated by the subject and think that you won't be able to do it, because it's quite well paced out, I would say. Also, very importantly, you can download the project files for this particular tutorial in the description below, but I would highly recommend that you watch the tutorial in order to fully understand what we're doing and how we're doing it, and also how you can modify the material to further suit your needs. Also, the space scenes behind me, you can actually get this on my Gumroad, ArtStation, or become a Patreon, and you will be able to get access to this particular scene, which has the ring already set up. It's got a planet, it's got this nice space station, actually the one right here on the right. This is a very complex space station made with nanite. I'm really proud of it. It's all actually animated and it's massive. You can actually play around in this scene, and it's a very big scene. I'll show you just a 10 seconds of that, just so you can understand what comes along with it. So check this out. We've got a ship, and we can fly it around, and we can go near the space station, and we're just passing by it, and this is so cool. Asteroid fields and everything coming up with this scene. So yeah, I'm really proud of it. But yeah, if you want to give it a look, just give it a try. Just have a look in the description below. So that's the scene. This is not the project file, but this is the scene that you can get from my store. But the project file will contain the ring setup that we've done. So let's not delay it any further. If you guys want to support the channel, you know what to do. You know how I love coffee. But yeah, this is a bit of a lengthy one, but it's very much worth it. Trust me, you're going to learn a lot of things from this. If you have questions, if you have things that you want to say, if you've got tips and tricks that you want to share with other people, please feel free to leave a comment. I respond to all comments as well. I do want people to understand what I'm trying to do and why I'm doing it, and hopefully in the process I'll learn some things myself. Let's begin. Okay, now if you guys followed my earlier tutorial on the space creation series, I have created a ring that was uncustomizable, and it was made in a different way from this ring. That was actually on it was a circular mesh that I've created in Blender, and then I added the texture of a Saturn ring on top, and that was very bare boned as opposed to what I'm doing here. So we're going to do something differently. The difference is that now we're going to be using a plane, pretty much a square plane, to create the effect, which is also going to be customizable, and we're going to use the textures that are found within Unreal Engine rather than bring any outside textures. So with that in mind, let's have a look at starting. The first thing you want to do is add in a shape so you're able to visualize what you're doing. So we're going to bring in a plane, and we're going to give it a quite a big surface. You don't need to do that, but just for the sake of navigating around it. So this is our plane, and it has a basic material, so we need to add a new material to it. Now if we can create a material by right clicking and selecting material. I've already got one here called M-Dust Rings. Go and double click that material and open it, and in here I have a texture sample. Now if you type in texture sample and bring it in, and then you search in this box for noise, you'll see all the noise textures that are available in Unreal Engine, and I've used this one here, and I'm sure you can use really any one of them that's got like a grayscale or like a color RGB, but seamless noise texture will be fine. So just use anything that you've got in there. And with this texture in here, we can start creating our sort of like first ring. Now, one thing to note about the plane is that we are going to create a sphere mask that hides the edges of the plane, and then a sphere mask that hides the center of the plane. And then in between, we're going to use opacity to determine where the rings are no longer visible. And the sphere masks will play a very important role to make this effect work, and I'll show you how we set them up. But for now, let's get this texture to look the way we want it. And we're going to use a vector to a radial value for that. And if we double click this, you'll notice that it's got 3 different outputs, and one of them is a radial coordinate, vector converted to angle, and then a distance, linear distance. We're actually going to use the linear distance. You can see what it's going to do to the texture, but that's the one that we want to use. So I'm going back into the material, and this is the linear distance right here. We don't need to input anything in the vector or UVs. We'll just leave those as default. We just need this linear distance. Now, what we're going to do, because if we take this and we connect it into our UVs there, you can see it has already transformed our texture into a circular motion. It's a seamless circular motion, which is what we wanted. But we do want to have some control over it. And we'll deal with that control in just a bit. For now, let's just leave it how it is. Now what we want to do is we want to give it some form of a color control. So we're using this particular texture here as an alpha between 2 colors. So for that, we're going to be searching for a linear interpolate, and we're going to add that in there. And like I've said to you, we're going to use this as an alpha, so I'm going to connect that into the alpha channel, and then we have an A and a B. So what we're going to do is we're going to be doing number 3 on the keypad pressed, and left click, and this adds a a 3-point value. So this is, it can be a color. We're going to right click it and say convert to parameter, and we're going to call this color. Sorry, we're going to call color, and we'll decide a number later. For now, let's just see how many colors we're actually going to have. But this is going to be one of the 2 colors. So for this particular one, we'll put color 01. And then we can duplicate this one, and we'll rename this to color 02. And then we can connect this into the B value and this into the A value. Okay, so we've got our lerp, and as I said to you, this texture here decides which color is being displayed. So I think if we do this, we should be able to see. Obviously the colors are both black, so let's give them different tints. I'm going to make this blue, and I'm going to make this maybe red or something like that. Okay, now we're still not really able to see anything there. What I'm going to do, I'm going to switch over to a plain view like that. Sometimes Unreal won't display what you're trying to show, but it's not like we're actually controlling this effect in any particular way either. So let's actually have a look at doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a multiply node to be able to control this. So I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to connect our linear distance to that, connect this to the UV. And then in here, we're going to have a something that I call a, like a frequency. So S on the keyboard, left click, type in frequency 01, connect that into the B value, add a number 1 here and press apply. And this will allow us to control. You can see in here, the output is now different. So let's, sorry, yeah, I didn't do preview mode. There we go. Now I've got it. I pressed the wrong button. So I'm previewing this material, and we can see what's happening because of this. Now, if this number changes, then we'll get various different effects. So you can see what's happening as I change the number. But we'll leave it at a default of 1. We also can randomize what's going on. So we can put an add node in here, connect the linear distance, connect this over here, add another parameter, call it a randomizer, and connect that in there as well. And this randomizer will allow us to get once we start playing around with the settings, will allow us to get different values from the linear distance, and you'll see what I mean in a bit. Now also in here, we'll multiply this multiply by 1 and do an apply, right? And now let's see. Yeah, okay, so for now nothing's going on, it's fine. We'll see it in action on the actual material itself, but let's leave the randomizer to 0 for now. Now remember, we are adding a vector to radial value over here, and basically what this is doing is converting a 2D vector to a radial value. In simple terms, imagine you have a flat surface with a point in the, like flat surface with a point in the middle here. And if you pick any spot on that surface, you know, like that, for example, any of these spots, the vector to radial value node tells you how far that spot is from the center point. So how far is this particular point from that center point? Converting it into a value that represents its distance and the angle relative to the center again. Right, this is useful for creating effects that, you know, spread out and change as you move away from a central point on the surface. And this is exactly what we're seeing over here when we've fed this entire sort of part within our noise texture. Now, very importantly, the frequency over here will determine how much of these sort of effect, you know, this effect is visible and how it changes. The randomizer again just adds a number to the linear distance in over here, which just changes the whole effect. In essence, you could say that the randomizer and the frequency kind of functions the same, but it's like the frequency is something that you set and you want to have set in stone, and then the randomizer just randomizes that value. This is important because you can remember the number of the randomizer, and this will forever will always display this in the same way based on how the frequency is also set. And obviously we're doing that as an alpha, so that's being used as an alpha. So the ring itself, you know, these colors, the red and the blue in this particular instance, where will they be displayed based on this alpha, based on this radial value? Now this entire setup could be done as well for the rest of the points that we're going to add, the rest of the rings, but we're actually going to use a different method for that. Okay, with that done, we now need to have a look at how many sort of rings we're going to have. And what I mean by this is, like, if I connect this material now to the base color, and by the way, our actual material itself has to be a translucent material, and I would definitely do two-sided because you want your ring to be visible from both ends in this particular way. So if we press apply, we can now go back to our you know, our thing here. It seems I have lost my material. Let me just press back. There we go. I'm going to right click and create a material instance, and this material I'm going to add to our plane, and now we can see the ring being created, and it's exactly how we saw it in the material editor. Now if I have a look at connecting this alpha over here, we might get a different sort of effect. So pressing apply, we don't really have any control over it, so it's actually showing us, you know, what the same thing. But let me just have a look at connecting it this way and just doing an opacity sort of value over here like that. We can connect that into the B value, press apply. We will need to double click our material instance so we can actually control the material. These are going to be the parameters for it. So if we look at the opacity, it's set to 0. We can obviously put this at 1, and this you know, we've got this frequency here that runs, and the randomizer, which you can see now what it's doing when it's applied, but we're not really getting the effect that we wanted in terms of the opacity. As you can see, when we play around with the opacity, where the brightest areas remain a bit more visible, the darker areas become more invisible, but you can't really just have the brighter areas just remain as bright. So we need to fix that with some other, using some other nodes. So I'm going to go back into our material here, and let's have a look at what we can do next. For us to create the proper opacity for this, we will actually first have to set up our sphere masks, and we're going to do that now. We won't need this particular bit right here, so I'm going to take these out for now, or at least just take the multiplier and leave the opacity there for now. We're going to go somewhere around here. Let me just take these nodes out of the way, and we want to start working here because there's a few points to be added. The first thing that we want to do, we want to add the virtual coordinates for our ray trace plane in world units. So with that in mind, we actually have a node for that. So virtual plane coordinates. And this is a node that will require a plane normal axis and a plane center. So we're literally, we're declaring that. So how do we declare the plane center? So we can actually take the object position, and then we plug that in there, and then the plane normal axis, right? This is a coordinate, this is a 3-point coordinate, and we can do this by taking the object orientation, okay? And this will allow us to make sure that our material aligns with the object as well. So we've got that in there, And now we need to set up the sphere masks, the UV coordinates from here. We need to set up the sphere masks with that. Now, what we also want to do is we need to make sure that we're dividing this by the object radius. So we're going to add a divide node, connect the UVs, and we can take the object radius, and we're dividing that value by it. We're now going to add a sphere mask in here, and we'll duplicate it so we can have two of these, because one of them is for the the edge fade out, the outer ring, and this is going to be the inner edge. So that's why we have two of them. With that in mind, we need to fill up all these values. So we've got the edge hardness, which we can control with a parameter, and then we need to control the outer and the inner edge by using the radius. So we're going to do that via parameters as well. So that's why we're going to add a multiplication here and a multiplication here. We're going to add our parameter. This is going to be the inner edge right here. And we can connect this over like that. Let me just duplicate this parameter, bring it here. We're going to call this the outer edge. Let's just try and keep the naming the same, and then we're going to put that into here. Okay, just make sure that it's either in A and B, but normally parameters you want to put them in the A value like that. So we've got that, and we're going to multiply a singular value between that, so we have like a default start point. We'll decide what that needs to be in a bit, but then this part here connects to the radius, and then this one connects to the radius as well. Now we need to set up the hardness, and we're able to do that with a parameter as well. So we're going to call this edge hardness, like that, and the edge hardness will connect to both of these in that way. Now, some default values that I've worked out, so you could probably set in here a 1, and then the inner edge and outer edge, you don't want to have too much away from the plane, so maybe 0.5 here, and these are just default values. Obviously we're going to change them, and then the inner edge at the 0.2, something like that. But we're going to change these values anyway once we start doing that. Now in the A point here, we can connect our divide node that we've done, something like that. Try and keep your material clean if you need to. Maybe add more points like this, and just make sure you do a more of a cohesive sort of noodle fest in here. Okay, so we've got that in there. So far we are a default value of 1. We'll keep that to where it is, but as you notice, we have no value of B. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide it a number, a constant of 2 with no value, and we're going to connect that in there, and we should be able to do the same here. Okay, so something like that, so we don't get an error when we compile. Now we need to have a look at doing some subtraction between the two. So we'll add a, we'll type in a subtract like that, and we'll connect these two together. You see, like that. Okay, now I want to just quickly break this material snippet a bit further. And in our material, we've used the virtual plane coordinate over here, right, to this node to project our UV coordinates onto our object. And we're in the plane normal axis. We've set the object orientation, which just ensures that we're utilizing the object orientation to determine the direction of the virtual plane. And then we're also using the object position in the plane center, which ensures that we're deciding where the center of the plane should be. And then we're taking the UVs of this and we're dividing it by the object radius, and this ensures that if you have a plane like that, right, and it's got the circular pattern in here, if you scale up the plane, let's say you make it bigger, the circular pattern scales up with the plane rather than just remains static or the same size, right? So this helps us to ensure a sort of a continuous correlation between that. We're also added 2 sphere masks at which we connected the divided UVs from our virtual plane coordinates into the A value, and then we're using using a constant 2 point to connect into the B value in here of each of the sphere masks, which is also very important because we're doing that. This effectively will move both the sphere masks in the center of the plane, right? That's what's going to happen if we do that in the B value. Now, we've also added parameters. One of them controlling the outer edge and one of them controlling the inner edge, and this is going to be important because this is going to decide obviously how those are looking like and how much we're fading on the edge and then in the inner part. And we're also using an edge hardness to have a softer transition or a harsher transition between the areas that we are masking. And in this particular case for rings, you might want to go quite hard with these and use quite a higher value for it. Now we're also using a subtract node over here between the two sphere masks, so we're subtracting this sphere mask from this sphere mask, which is a very nice and neat way of creating effectively a ring or an nullus pattern. So with the inner mask cutting out the heart of the outer mask. Now the visual aspect of this ring is manipulated by the parameter values that we've obviously defined in here. And this is going to, you know, have quite a make quite a difference based on what parameters we put in. Now, to sum it up, with this shader, we've crafted the dynamic ring pattern on our object. Now, the beauty of it is how flexibly it adapts its size and aesthetic based on the object's orientation, position, and radius. So I hope that gives you a bit of an explanation as to what we've actually achieved here as well. And now we can use this as a form of an alpha between all the colors that we want to do. And what I mean by this is that we'll be able to add more colors, not just these two. So we're going to be looking for a lerp. We're going to use lerp multiple float 3 or 4. No, 3 should be fine. We'll do 3, and we can connect this into the alpha of this. And we've got this color over here, so we're going to disconnect it from the base color because we need to lerp it with the rest of them. And we'll connect this into probably color 3 for now. Sorry, this one here, and potentially might connect another one here into these two. So for these two, we can add new colors. I'm going to be adding another parameter in here, right click and convert the parameter. I'm going to call this color 0 3 like that, and we can plug that in there. And then it's, you know, give this a different color. You don't want it to be black. And then duplicate it, give this maybe another color, maybe like a yellowish, and connect that. Oh, sorry, you got to rename it. So if that's color 3, this is going to be color 4. Otherwise, we're changing both the colors at the same time. They have the same name. So connect that like that. And we'll see what we're going to do with the 4th value, if we're going to add anything in there or not. But now, what we also need to do is we need to address a vector converted to, a vector basically where we can use that to add the alpha rings gap between each ring. So without this, our noise would be visible at all times. So until the point or the outer or the inner sphere mask comes into effect. So we've got to create a bit of setup in here to make this work, because right now, if we connect this to the base color and we connect this, let me just stop the preview here. So stop preview mode. We connect at the base color, we're not really getting anything. And if we connect this to the opacity, you know, again, we're not really getting anything. So we still need to use another vector to radial value. So I'm going to actually duplicate that and bring it, we're going to bring this up here like that. And this one, we are going to drive a noise through. So let me just search for a noise. And this noise, we are going to be looking at what's the best value to be used, but normally it's probably a gradient. But let's just we'll have a look to see. With this noise, we're going to use the linear distance. We can actually use the vector converted to angle as well, and I'll show you what that does later. We've got the noise over here. We do want to sort of be able to control this as well. So I'm going to do the same thing where we add a randomizer, and we can actually connect the same one from here, but you don't have to do a connection like that. You can just duplicate this and bring it up here Plug that in there. And now we can do a multiply in here, so we can add a controller for this. I'm going to connect this to the position. And in the multiply in here, add a new, a new parameter. We'll do a frequency 02. So that's a 1. And then connect it over like that. And now this noise, we can increase its strength if we want to by doing a multiplication. We'll add a new, a new parameter, call this intensity, and plug that in there as well. We're going to clamp the value, so it's between 0 and 1, so that's why we're going to be searching for a saturate node, and connect that together like that. Now we've got a subtract here, and we've got obviously, well, what we need to do is we need to multiply between this value and this subtraction. So I'm going to add a multiply node, connect the saturate with the subtract like that. And now this multiply can be connected into our opacity like that. Now, if we press apply, this isn't going to really be very helpful because everything has now disappeared, because we still need to fix our missing color from here, and we still need to do a bit of mixing of other materials as well. So first of all, let's just see. Yeah, we could probably use this. And let's press apply, but we also need to obviously connect it to something. We don't have anything in the base color right now. We're not going to be able to see anything because the only thing that we've got plugged in is an opacity. So I'm going to take the little bit 4 inputs and I'm going to put that into the base color like that. I'm going to press apply, and let's now have a look at some of our values, because what you'll notice in here is that we have some default values that are not exactly right. Like for example, this intensity. We'll need to play around with it. We're also going to need to look at what sort of noise to use. And of keeping the randomizer to 0, the same thing as down here, so that's fine. Let's have a look. Let's just apply this material. And one thing you can do is you can click this arrow right here, and it will show you what's going on with the material, right, with the noise. This is what we're seeing right now. And if I'm going to the space station simulator, we're not seeing anything in the world, even though we've got the base color and the opacity setup. And this is one thing to always keep a note of. This ring has to be at an angle, so even an angle of 1 will make a difference. Now let's try and play around a bit with the settings. So we've got an edge hardness, like I told you, and you can see if we play around with it, it does some changes. And then the frequency is going to change some things. We can have a look at frequency 02, and that's going to change a few things. Now, obviously inner edge, so you can see how that's sort of masking the inner edge, and you can have so much, there's so much to play here with. Like, honestly, there's so much to do. And then we've got an outer edge here as well that we can do, but just bear in mind that you don't want to get too close to the edge of the actual mesh, so bear that in mind. And we've obviously got the randomizer, which will change the effect completely. But further customize this, we can have a look in here and change our noise, and we can try a gradient type. And if you do that, you can have a look and see what that looks like. So that's changed a little bit. You're just gonna have to decide on your own which is the best one that you want for your scene, which is going to be the one that's in terms of resolution and so on, in terms of cost to your shader, which one is going to be the best one. Like, for example, Voronoi is pretty cool if you guys want to use that one. I like Voronoi, quite nice. So let's leave it as that, as Voronoi. Now, another challenge here is that the planet is casting a shadow, right? And we have no shadow on this. This is not a shadowed type of effect, which means that this will look fake. So if we add a sphere right here in the center, and let's actually try that. We'll add a sphere, drop it in there, and we're gonna have to make it a lot larger. So maybe like, again, 10. Well, 10. No, that was way too much. So something like that, just for our purposes here, just to sort of try and emphasize this. So you can see this sphere will not cast a shadow on this material, and there's nothing you can do about that. But the one thing that we can do is we can trick the material right? Into thinking that we, create a sort of a gradient in here that will act as a shadow. And we're also going to control that shadow by using a blueprint to be the opposite of where the directional light is coming from. And that's really going to help us out, because this is where directional light angle is, and this is going to be hitting this area, and it's going to make it so that we create the illusion that there's a shadow created by the planet. And to do that is it's not very complex. So I'm going to show you guys the material to be done to do this, and it's using much of the same materials that we've already sort of used already into this. And it's at the end of the day, it's a multiplication between the base, for the base color, and this shadow effect that we're sort of adding in. And we're going to start off with a virtual plane coordinate. So I'm going to be duplicating this from here. And what we need to do is we need to feed it some information on the plane X axis. Effectively, we're trying to tell it where the light is coming from. And we're also deciding where does the effect sort of originate from, the shadow. So with that, we're going to be using the object position and orientation, and I'll show you in a bit. So the object position will tell us where the the plane center is. We're going to get an object orientation in here as well, and I'm going to put that into the plane normal axis like that. And now we need to define the plane x-axis. So we're going to be creating a third orthogonal vector. Now this takes two vectors and generates a third orthogonal vector from them. This ensures that our vectors are orthogonal to each other. The first vector's direction is favored over the second, so bear that in mind. And that's why we're going to take this create third orthogonal vector node, connect the vector 3, because we're doing an x, y, and z type of effect, so we'll put that in there. Now we do need to set up our vector 1, which we did say that it's going to take the vector's direction is favored over the second, so we'll put the vector 1 from the object orientation, and vector 2 is going to be the sort of the indication of where the light source is. So I'm actually going to create a colored material. We're going to convert this to a parameter, and we're going to call it a light direction. And what color? Normally the colors for this is a bright red, right? And this is you'll notice this even in the material functions themselves. Generally, there's things like that where they're being set to this sort of particular color. Sorry, let me just go back in here. And now we need to connect this into our vector 2. But we would like to first normalize the value. So let me just bring that in there. And this is a vector that we're normalizing, adding it in there like that. And we're going to press apply for now. We obviously haven't yet finished the material. We do need to take we're going to take the RNG, so the red and green channel, which is the UV, right? We're going to be taking that information. We're going to divide the virtual plane coordinate by the object radius, because we do want our shadow not to cover the entire plane, but just a portion of it. So we're going to add a divide button in here, take the UVs, and we'll take the object radius as well, connect that into the B value like that. And then we can search for a break out float to 2 components, and it's only 2 because it's only an RNG, so we're going to put that in there, 2 values. And then with the 2 values in there, we can start creating a sort of a rule set, so to speak. So in order for us to create the shadow, we are going to use a radial gradient exponent, and this is going to be very useful because this is going to be the sort of the point that creates the shadow, like I've said. Now we do, the center position requires a vector 2. So we're actually just going to add a simple vector 2 in there, like that. Now the radius of this is something that you can define, but for now we'll just add a value, and we'll do a sort of not a very large value, maybe like a 0.5, something like that. And we can have a look at setting up the density of this effect. So we can add a parameter, and we can call this shadow density. We can put that in there, give it, I don't know, maybe like 100 or something like that. We'll tweak the number later depending on our needs. And then we want to connect this, but unfortunately, I mean, we've broken the two UVs. We separated them more like, and we need to bring them together and bring it into this node. So we can actually do that by using a make float node. And we can take the red channel, put it in there, and then connect this like that. But now for the green channel, we need to create a rule set, like I've said. And this is again, we're trying to do multiple operations in order to get that properly done. Now we need to calculate the sort of direction of the light as opposed to the normal of our plane. And we already have the object orientation that we're using. We've got the light vector. We're going to duplicate these two, bring them over in here, and we're going to want to do the dot product between the object orientation and the light vector. And this is one way to, when calculating lighting, the dot product can be used to find the angle between the light direction and the surface normal. So with this in mind, we're actually going to bring the dot product, connect this over into the A value and the light vector into the B value. Now we do want to get the absolute value of these vectors, so we're going to use ABS for that. We don't want any negative values on here, just positives. And we're going to clamp this between 0 to 1, make things a lot easier this way. So we're going to saturate here, like that. And what we want to do is we want to lerp this information into the second sort of point in here, the y scalar number, and we're going to look for linear interpolate to do this. We're going to be doing this between the green channel, and then we're going to do this between a value of 0. So we're lerping between 0, which means don't display the shadow, and feeding the information to display the channel. And we're going to put this as an alpha. This is a deciding factor. This is going to decide whether or not we have a shadow being displayed in what area of the plane. And then we're going to connect this into the Y value over here, right, like that. Now we're going to sort of do a bypass from the green channel over at the front of this radial exponent. And it's really all about values. So we're going to use an if node to decide certain rule sets. So I'm going to add a multiply node in here, connect the radial gradient exponent, and connect this if point over here like that. Now we've got to feed some information, but the first thing we want to do is do the input, which is the A value, and we need to put a value of B. So we're going to use value 0. We could obviously just leave it as B, but now we've defined what B is, and in this case we've defined that B is a value of 0, okay? And now we're going to add a value of 1 and another value of 0. Actually, you could probably just use this one here, right? And then this value of 0 can connect into if A bigger, higher than B, or A equal B. But if A is lower than B, then do 1, like that, okay? And this will allow us to sort of create the effect that we want. Now we need to set up the how intense this shadow is, the strength of it. So we can clamp all of this information to 0 and 1. So we've got some really nice fine details here, and I can add a multiplication, can connect this over like that, and then add a scalar parameter. We're going to call it shadow strength, like that. And then we're going to connect this into our multiply node, and now we can take all of this and plug it into here and press apply. Now if we have a look, if we take the sphere away, nothing's actually happened. There's no shadow, and there is a reason for that, because how can there be any shadow if we haven't told the engine where the light is coming from? So that's also an important bit. Now also, did I apply? Yes, I did. And for some reason, I am not able to see the shadow strength in here, which is a bit odd. Let me just have a look at the hierarchy in here. No, not unrelated. Hierarchy M-dust ring in like this. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've just realized this is not connected for some reason. Yeah, okay, there we go. Now they're connected. And now let's have a look. Well, actually, yeah, there is a shadow. It's just literally doesn't know where the light is coming from, so it's made everything into a shadow, right? You can see it's still there, but it's shadowed. And we've got our shadow density and strength in here, and we've got light direction. This will do nothing without a blueprint. So now it's time to do the blueprint itself in order to get that up and running. Now the time has come, unfortunately, to get rid of our poor little plane here. So we're going to press delete. And instead we're going to go into the content browser, right click and create a new blueprint. And we're going to create an actor. Gonna call it BP ring, just for, you know, just to make it easy. Then I'm going to double click it and this will open the blueprint. Now we're going to do most of our, well, all of our work in the construction script. In the construction script, we are going to add a sequence, and this sequence will fire in 2 directions, and that's really it for now. Now, what we want to do is first we need to add a plane, which is going to be our ring plane. I'm going to just for ease of understanding, is going to be called ring plane. This ring plane, if we compile, we go back into our scene, we can actually drop it in here, make it quite large, just like what we did before. So now we have the same plane as we did before. You can see the plane is capturing the shadow because it's not translucent, doesn't have a translucent material. Now we're going to go back into our blueprint in here, and we need to set up the material for the plane. So to do that, we first need to add some components. So I'm going to click this button over here, and I'm going to call the first one ring material, just so we know. And we can actually click this and type in material instance. And there we go, we've got the material instance. We can press this button here if we want to see it in the viewport, but if not, we'll leave it like that. We've got the ring material, but then we've got to define what material what material we want to put in here. So with that in mind, with this selected, let's just compile, and this will allow us to add the material in here. Now, if we control space, we've got the content browser. We can now drop the material instance. So we're telling Unreal that I want that material to be added, and then we can pull this, arrow from here, and then search for create dynamic material instance. That's the one that we want. But if we select create the dynamic material instance ring plane, it will automatically connect our ring plane as well, which is what we want. But then here, the source material, this is our ring material. So I'm going to drag that in there with control left click, and I've added this in. Nothing at the optional name, and now we've got to tell it what to do, which is basically set our material for the ring. And with that in mind, we can add a new sort of part in here, which we're going to call from dynamic material instance DMI underscore, and we're going to call that ring. And we know this is going to be the ring material, but it's a DMI, but we've got to actually change this to a material instance dynamic, like that, right? And then we can alt left click and drag it out, and it's got this option here where it says we've got the return value, which is the DMI ring, and then this option here, like that. And that's done. Now this applies. If we compile, go in the viewport, well, actually, let me just go into the world. This has added the material that we've created, okay, to this plane, or in theory, at least, it should have done that. We'll see if we have any errors, right? Okay, so now we've got to decide what we're going to do with the second part of the sequence. And for this, we need to set the vector parameter value of our light direction. So I'm going to drag in here set vector parameter value, and this is the we're doing this in here. We can have a collection, which I'm not really sure actually. No, I don't want to do it as a collection. So let me just have a look. Set vector parameter value, because I want to target our material instance dynamics. So let's just have a look. Which one is it? Ring. Is it this one? No, that's not it either. Set vector parameter. Ooh, it's gonna be value on materials, primitive data, no, custom. That's vector parameters, ring plane. That's just gonna be on the material, but that's not what I want, because I want it to be on the instance dynamic instead of this. So what you need to do is right click and make sure you untick context sensitive, and then type in set vector parameter value, which is gonna be, well, let me just type it in like that, and then it's gonna be this one over here. Nope, got it wrong. Honestly, I hate the fact that you type it in and there we go. You will get lucky, right? It'll be the second one, it seems, but for you, it might be the first one. So we can insert that in there, and we've got our DMI ring here. We can connect that into the target like that. And we've got to name the parameter, and the name of the parameter will be what we've named it over here. So let me just copy that name and then paste it in here like that. So we've got the light direction, and we need to give it a value here for the linear color structure. So because we're using a vector, we want to bring in, this is where we're going to connect the sunlight. So we're going to press on the component in here and type in sunlight. We're going to make sure that this is actually a directional light like that. Also click this button over here because you want to be able to select the directional light within the world, and now press compile, and we can drag this in here like that. Now we need to get the rotation of the sunlight, so we're going to be get vector rotation, that, and now we need to get rotation, remember, of, sorry, rotation of X. I'm trying to get the rotation. There we go. Get rotation X vector. And remember that we're doing this because of how we set it up, the material in here with the X and Y. And now we're going to connect this like that, and we have a return value here of a vector, which we can now sort of plug it into this value, but we're going to have to convert this. So if we plug it in directly, Unreal will automatically convert it using a vector to linear color. We do need to sort of multiply this. Now, if I remember correctly, we can multiply this by 1. Let me just connect that in there. We're going to have to change this to, sorry, not that. Got a trick on Unreal Engine in giving you a number here, which is always a tricky bit. So what you want to do is disconnect it, and no, not like, we really need to put in a value in here, but it's not really allowing me. Let me just connect that like that. You see, it's creating all of these points, which is a vector, but I don't want this. We can convert the pin. Yeah, we're probably gonna have to do that. We'll convert the pin to not an integer, sorry. We want to connect this into a float. Connect this like that. Oh, come on. Convert to float, single precision. 0 - 1, see what happens, and then compile. Now we can go over here in the material. We can select the sunlight, as you can see, so we can select the directional light. Let me just rotate this. You can see the effect in there. You can actually see the effect, but right now it's still all completely black, so we're gonna have to see what's causing that to not work. Now if we go in the material instance and we play around with the shadow strength, we'll be able to get something going on. So 1 second, this is auto saving. So I've now added some values in here, and you can see we've got the shadow on one side, but it's just looking wrong. Now this looks to be a radius problem to begin with. So if we're going to go back into our material in here where we set the radius, right, where it goes in the radial gradient exponent, we set this 0.5. So let's try a 0.12 and see what happens. Press apply, And as you can see, our shadow is inverted. Instead of it not shadowing this area, it's shadowing the other side. So that's a bit of a problem. We've obviously got to look at how do we get this working properly, because it's just literally inverted. One thing that I haven't realized is that I haven't inverted it at all myself, the effect, because I've been, everything in here has been done to create this shadow form. So the best way to invert something is just add a 1 minus node, and you do that, 1 minus x, and you plug this in here where our material was about to go, and then we apply, and this will spin that entirely around. Now another issue that we've got is basically, you can see in here, the shadow is being displayed on the other end. But before we look into that, I do also want to look at the shadow strength in here is way too harsh, even though in our material, in here, it's maybe, well, no, sorry, it's the density of the shadow itself is just a bit too much. We can obviously decrease that, but in order to get a better value in here, we can also add a, right here, we can add a saturate. So we just keep it between a 0 and 1 instead of, just jumping about like that. So, and what I mean by 0 to 1, we're going to set it between, something like that. It's going to help us to get a better sort of feel. But as I've said to you, it's still turned up, around. Now we could, even if we if we don't have any directional light, it doesn't know where the light is coming from. So I can select directional light, and it knows the directional light is coming from there. But with that in mind, the shadow is pointing that way, and that's not something that we want. We want the shadow to be pointing backwards here. And of course, like anything, this has an easy fix as well. In our blueprint in here, we've multiplied this by 1. But if we multiply it by -1 and compile, shadow is facing away. Right? Now bear in mind, you can use the entire technique that we just did here to create a shadow to also create, if you want, some streaks of light here, make these tones lighter, brighten them up. So this gives you a sort of a nice effect where you could have, like a brighter area here and a darker area here of the ring, which will give it a lot more life. And also there's something else that you can do as well into the material. So let's just grab the material, go in here, and I'm going to show you something very interesting. Over here, we can use the vector converted to angle and connect that into the add button. Press apply, and then if you go back in here, you'll notice that we have a sort of a different effect going on here now with these sort of streaks like that. And we can do, 1 second, where is it? We could put this back into linear distance like that, but then put this one here, connect this like that, press apply, and now we're changing the entire structure of the actual effect. So you can see what's happened. Now we can play around with the settings, and let me just decrease the edge hardness, play around a bit with these frequencies like that, and you can see what sort of effects we can get with it. I mean, this is really amazing. We obviously got to push a bit further away from the inner edge just so we don't, mesh with the planet. And this gets shadowed as well, which is really cool. So I really like the fact that you can sort of do that, and you can also do something else with this as well, like for example, create a sort of an effect where it's animated. And what I mean by this is, if you go back into the material in here, and we have a look at this vector to radial, which one was it now? Yeah, I think this one down here. Let me just have a look. You can add a rotator like that, and then also add a time like that. Connect the time over in here, leave the coordinate to 0, and connect this into the vector UVs and press apply. Let's have a look. You see now we have lights sort of moving around here, dancing a little bit. And you don't necessarily have to, you don't necessarily have to connect it in there. You can also take this as exact node, and you can connect it over in here. If you do that, you press apply, Have a look. Now it's rotating, and you can also connect it this way. Press apply with a linear distance, and now you have something like this. So this is, you know, these are very wild things that you can do with it, play around with materials like this. But I would definitely recommend that you do experimentations with this, because there's a lot to be done. Obviously, this is not centered, so you'd want to have a look in here, looking at the coordinate, you know, connecting that, so that we're ensuring that we're centering this in the object. So you can take like the object position, object radius, and things like that in order to make it happen. But that's really about it in terms of you know, creating a ring that's fully customizable and ready to use. And that was very much it for me. Really appreciate guys for showing the support, watching this tutorial, and you know, hopefully you'll comment and you'll like the video, you'll subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. I hope you've learned something. I really want to thank my patrons, thank everybody that's been supportive of the channel and supportive of the work that I do. Please join our Discord if you'd like to learn more, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.